It's May, you guys. This time of year always brings about the promise of a warm and prosperous summer, and it's a time of celebration in many parts of the world. In Europe, it's a time to reflect on humanity's connection to nature and to those who came before, and their traditions and celebrations reflect that. In the United States, we also have a deep connection to our past. For instance, on the 4th, we celebrate Yoda, and then on the 5th, we celebrate Mexico's independence from France. Buenos dias, mi amigos, it's the good old days. Today we'll be answering the question that's on every gringo's mind this time of year. What exactly is Cinco de Mayo, and why is it so popular in the United States? The history of Cinco de Mayo is often lost on many non-Mexican inhabitants of the U.S. Most people throw around phrases like cultural appropriation to describe the country's relationship to the holiday, and while this is more or less accurate, the version of the holiday that most Americans celebrate is about as authentically Mexican as hard-shelled tacos. That's right, it's time for more Mexican history. When we last left Mexico, it was reeling in the aftermath of the Texas Revolution. About 3 seconds into its hard-fought independence, Texas called up its neighbor to the north and asked for an annexation. And when the U.S. politely obliged, Mexico was incensed and was like, hey, that's not an independent country, that's a rebellious part of Mexico. However, the U.S. had destinies to manifest and cotton in its ears, so it decided to occupy the territories claimed by both Texas and Mexico. This kicked off what would become known as the Mexican-American War, which any student of history will tell you did not go very well for Mexico, who was forced to cede all of this land to the United States afterwards. What was Mexico to do after all this? Break out into a civil war, great answer. Fighting broke out between the liberal and conservative factions over which direction the nation ought to take, to remain as a federal republic or just to give up and install a monarchy. A couple years of fighting later, and with support from the US, the liberal faction, led by this guy, would end up coming out on top and ending the Civil War. All was not well, however, for Mexico remained divided politically and its finances were in disarray. Facing financial crisis and political turmoil, Juarez made the decision to suspend Mexico's foreign debt to Spain, the UK, and France. So, the three great powers all hopped on their boats and sailed to Veracruz to demand reimbursement. Once they got there, Spain and the UK quickly reached an agreement and sailed back home, but France, in cahoots with the Mexican conservatives, saw an opportunity to undermine the growing influence of the US in North America and decided to stick around and invade Mexico itself. However, on the 5th of May 1862, the French forces were stopped dead in their tracks on the way to Mexico City at the Battle of Puebla, a resounding victory for the defending Mexican government that stymied France's incursion into the country for the next few months. So there you have it. Cinco de Mayo celebrates an obscure battle during a war that few people outside of Mexico have even heard about. So, what happened to boost its profile in the US in the first place? Well, the battle became sentimentalized in Mexican society during the long administration of Mexican President Porfirio Diaz, including with the Mexican diaspora population outside of the country. However, following the Mexican Revolution which deposed Diaz, the celebration in Mexico began to decline in popularity, and remains just a minor holiday in Mexico to this day. The holiday really took off in the US during the mid-20th century during the Chicano movement, where the celebration took on a role of boosting cultural pride in the Mexican-American population during the ongoing civil rights movement. And honestly, it makes sense. Cinco de Mayo as a celebration of Mexican heritage, racial solidarity, and its subsequent commercialization is about as Mexican as St. Patrick's Day is Irish. Are you really surprised? Want more history content like this? Follow The Good Old Days on all social medias, share the video, and tag a friend who loves history. We'll see you in the next one. Brought to you by ScripTalk, talking prescription labels for the visually impaired.